In the SQLLite activity, running it brings up the main activity, which sets up two buttons. One will take you to the employer activity, the other to the employee activity. In the employer activity, it creates an activity form to enter employee details or employer details, two buttons, and it uses a recycler view. Adding the update DB function essentially duplicates the save function, except that instead of inserting, it's just going to update. There you go, database.update, and then it will read from DB to refresh the recycler view. You can search in there. When you actually click the search field, it'll take the values in the forms field to search the database. It's going to be in the read from DB. See, it builds the query using constant values set in the DB contract class in conjunction with the form field values. It passes the query onto the recycler view cursor adapter to process the results, and it uses the cursor to store the _ID of the item if there's only one item in the list. That's so we can actually just select that one to delete it or update that one alone. The cursor adapter processes the database query in the context of the recycler view. Return rows are processed into individual list items, and those views are inflated into the text views. The employee activity is essentially the same thing as the employer class, except it's using an extra recycler view to display the employer names that exist in the database. The second recycler view makes use of the join recycler view cursor adapter, which is essentially the same thing as the previous one, except it's got a few more text views to actually to inflate. It also has to make use of the sample DB contract query helper in order to actually get the delete functions and update functions to work correctly. You have to change the naming of the employer ID, because otherwise you end up with two _ID fields. If you're trying to update the second item in the list that actually has the employer that is number one, when you want to delete it, it'll delete the first item in the list instead of dealing with the second employee. The Firebase app sets up very similar. You have two buttons. You can either sign up or you can sign in. The sign up activity, you get options to basically sign up. You either take a picture with the actual camera intent, or you can select a picture from the gallery. It'll reset the image inside the app itself. There's some error checking just to make sure that there's some error checking on the actual sign up portion, and then it will do a create user with email and password through Firebase. The login activity, which then basically does a very similar thing. You're going to select create email view and a password view, and you're going to pass it on to sign in with email and password. It's also going to set you up with a button where you can actually select if you forgot your password. It does some error checking, very minimal error checking though. It's not consistent with the other error checking. The forgot password activity is just been built into Firebase. You can select your registered email ID and it'll send you a password reset token. Once you've logged in, it'll prompt you to basically add in your name and your phone number, which then just gets stored in the database and it displays it back in real time. You can then also update it, and then it'll update the display in real time. It uses a user class to update the information much easier.